Good early afternoon, everyone. I am excited that you are here with us. And I want to introduce to you, in case you don't already know, I mean, really, who on my page doesn't already know Sheila and Rebecca? But we are here and baby is present in the room. Baby is in the house. And that is perfectly okay. We are happy about this. So Rebecca breastfeeding in the background is the best. I know, right? Right? Sweet babies. I love it. I just have really noisy trains in the background. I don't have cute baby sounds. But we roll with all of the things, don't we? So what we want to talk about today is all of this new data. There have been some hot conversations going around on the Facebook pages, in the private groups, and so many things happening. And so when we are dealing with data, first of all, we all know that there are 100 ways to slice and dice data. And those things have to be done with people who are willing to let the data speak for itself, as opposed to approaching data hoping to achieve confirmation bias, right? So that's a super important thing. Now, the Great Sex Rescue was a game changer for data, because so many times, and if you are just watching and you have just discovered my page or Sheila's page, Sheila, if you're on Facebook, you can click over and share it over on your page so that it'll go live on your page right now too. But if you aren't already in the mix on this topic, Sheila and Rebecca and Joanna's book, The Great Sex Rescue, totally upended a lot of the harmful and dangerous assumptions that we have had in a plethora of Christian marriage and relationship material for not just recently, but years and years and years and years. And things that have become urban legend. They're just like embedded in our cultural assumptions in the Christian market. And most of those things have not been, are you there? Is it working? I can't hear you because you muted yourself. But most of those things have not been, okay, I'll keep talking, you fix it. Most of those toxic marriage materials, they haven't been based on actual data of large groups. They've been based on people's assumptions, based on small non-scientific studies or surveys. They haven't gone and actually done scientific research, peer-reviewed quality of thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of people. So the Great Sex Rescue actually did that. The data set is now in Purdue University's data set and has met all the criteria for peer review and been submitted for peer review, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And in Alberta, right?
Queen's University in Ontario, but yeah.
Queen's University in Ontario. Okay. Well, no, I want to get it right. I'm not Canadian, and correct me. That's fine. So anyway, the Great Sex Rescue did massive amounts of actual data. Now, Sheila and Rebecca and Joanna have gone and done another study, because the whole question is like, okay, but you studied all these women. What about the dudes? The dudes need their own study, right? So they've gone back and they've done this whole study with men on issues related to male sexuality, because you're right. It's not fair to just study one side of things and then to draw too many conclusions. We can only draw conclusions that are directly related to the study and what the study measures. So then we have to do other studies to draw other conclusions. I mean, we've even chatted about going in together on other studies and other conclusions, because we can't just pull data out of whatever we want if that wasn't what the study was measuring. So I know in my audience, my wild tribe, and we are an amazing bunch. I'm just going to brag on you, all of you, because I love my people. I love you guys. I love how dedicated our wild tribe is to truth seeking. I love how fierce you are as you come through the trenches from victim to survivor, out of lack of safety into stability, into strength, into Shiro. I love it. And I believe that a big, huge part of the journey of survivor, especially in betrayal trauma, it has a lot to do with learning to go from silenced to confident and strong in our voices. And that's one of the reasons I just don't censor stuff on my page unless somebody gets really nasty, because I know that learning and practicing questioning things, coming out with ideas, processing through and wrestling through concepts, it is a crucial part of going from voiceless to having a strong and fierce and confident voice. And so Wild is dedicated to providing that space for women. And I've been seeing that happen. And over the last few days, one of the hot topics that has been happening with is this upcoming data that has not yet been released. We can't all go and we can't go and all of us review it yet because it isn't out yet. But there are a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. Because some of the snippets that have been released ahead of time, before we get to see all the data, is some of it doesn't line up with the lived experience of betrayal trauma survivors. And so there's this disconnect, and all of a sudden there's this oh my goodness, can we trust this new data? And this is a question that's being asked by a lot of survivors as they're ramped up, because the Great Sex Rescue was this massive dynamite blowing down the walls of Jericho, right? And opening up conversations for things we knew but didn't have data for. So let's talk about that. First of all, just straight up question at the beginning. And I know I've sent you some of the questions that I have that I've collected, but are you releasing when the book comes out, it's the Good Guy's Guide to Great Sex, right? That's what's coming out with this. And you've also revamped the Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex, but we're talking about the guys right now. So when you're releasing it, are you releasing the data as well, just like you did with the Great Sex Rescue, or are you just releasing your interpretation of the findings? Because that's a question that's been raised.
Yeah, there's a lot of charts. There's not as many as Great Sex Rescue because they're very different books. Like Great Sex Rescue was let's burn it all down. Like this is all crap, and we need to confront the fact that it was that Christian marriage teaching was done really badly. The purpose of the Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex and the Good Guy's Guide to Great Sex is very different. They're books on how do we build a healthy foundation. So, they're not about tearing down harmful teachings as much as they are what does healthy look like. So it is a little, they're different books. So that's important to understand. But you'll recognize a lot of the charts look very similar. Yeah. If people believe this, they're 57% more likely to do this. They're 38% more likely to do this. They're 32% more likely to do. So it's very similar like that. I don't think there's quite as many, but I think the porn chapter probably has the most.
But when they show up, it's similar to how we did.
Yeah. So it'll have a similar feel.
Okay. Now, is the data from this, was it held to the same scientific standards and research standards that the Great Sex Rescue study was? Okay.
Yes.
In fact, actually, I know you said earlier that we had, and I apologize that my baby was making me go back and forth. I know you said earlier that we asked questions about male sexuality versus women's, but we actually, whenever possible, tried to even use the same kinds of questions and so that it was as parallel as possible. So that when we ask stuff about foreplay or about, emotional connectedness, we're using the same language, the same wording, so we can actually contrast and compare because we made our surveys as parallel as possible. So we had extra questions for the men we didn't have for the women, and we had extra questions for the women that we didn't ask the men. But we did it in a way that we can directly compare our results, even though they were two separate surveys.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And obviously a lot of thought and intentionality went into that. Are you anticipating handing that data set over to universities and stuff again as well for this? Is that
If they want it, we'd be
yeah,
definitely open
we
for
probably
it.
would. I mean, our big thing was great sex rescue. Like,
well, even just the survey for the women was just so long.
Yeah, it had a lot more questions. We tried to do this one a lot shorter because
men don't actually fill out as many. Like we just
yeah.
The dudes are just not going to hang out for 150
no,
questions.
well, you know, I mean, it's like, listen, women have not been given a voice before. You give women a voice and they're willing to talk, right? Whereas men have a voice. They're like, man, this doesn't really have the same appeal to me in the same way. So
I think it had like 60 questions.
It was still really long.
I mean, we'll certainly ask Andrew Whitehead if he wants it. We're not opposed to doing it. It's just, we have like our main focus right now is getting 3 peer-reviewed articles for Great Sex Rescue written. So
gotcha.
And that's like our main point. It's not that we're not going to do it. It's just,
it's done to the same standards. They could use it the exact same way. There's nothing about the research that makes it it's more about our schedules and our priorities.
And also,
gotcha.
Research from GSR was just more, from Great Sex Rescue was more groundbreaking.
Frankly, what we found in the men's survey is actually more echoed in other research already.
Gotcha.
We didn't actually find a lot that other surveys haven't already found, whereas with Great Sex Rescue, we found a lot of stuff that was brand new.
Yeah, and we asked so many more demographic questions so that they could ask a lot of different questions for it.
That makes sense. Yeah, and then you could compare it generationally in a different way as well. Okay, so I see comments coming in. I'm looking at your comments underneath here, and I'm keeping track of those guys. So, big question: how do you know people didn't lie? I mean, we all know addiction, especially sex addiction. I look at Dr. Omar Manwala's stuff on compartmentalization and deception, and we know that addicts lie. So, how are you able to confirm that people who are taking this survey about male sexuality and porn use and addiction weren't just saying what they thought would sound better?
Could we actually back up for a sec, Sarah? Because I think we need to say why people are upset. Because I want to stress the few big things that we found before, and then we'll get to this. So, major thing we found: porn use, very, very, very bad.
Okay. Right. Which confirms what we all know.
Yeah, it's like no surprises there.
When people watch porn, it has terrible effects. It makes you a more selfish lover. It gives you lower marital satisfaction. You're more likely to believe terrible things about women. You're more likely to have an entitled view of male sexuality. You're less likely to have a wife who orgasms. Like all these different things that we measured, everything is worse. Okay, so porn is worse. And the more porn you use, the longer you've used porn, and the younger you were when you started, the worse it is. So that's what we call a dose response effect. So the more you get, the worse it gets. You get more of a viral load, so to speak. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what we found overwhelmingly. And that confirms what we all would think.
What we all would think, and also what other research has all found.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like that was validated by other research as well.
Can I point out something just from a faith-based perspective? Though what you're saying that the data found is actually backed up with what we know about how we are created by God. The more we lend ourselves to something, the more we behold something, the more we become changed into that likeness. So that really is a confirmation of how we know the gospel versus sin works in the mind with an escalating addiction. So I think that is, I want to take a moment to throw that gospel side of things in there, because as people of faith, it's not just the neuroscience and the addiction science. It is also the faith-based thing right there. And I think that as you keep going, there will be some good news gospel things that we can also bring back in. So keep going.
Yeah. Okay. The other big thing that we were looking at, and this was really our purpose for all of our surveys that we've been doing, is we really feel that a lot of the problems with sexuality in the Christian world is the way we talk about them. And that the way we talk about them, it creates self-fulfilling prophecies, but it also creates excuses for sin. And so we wanted to see, is the way that we talk about this stuff even accurate? And does it harm? And one of the big things that we were measuring was this idea that lust is every man's battle. So we measured this for women. You know, when women are taught all men struggle with lust, it's every man's battle, they're less likely to orgasm, less likely to get aroused, their libido goes down, like all kinds of bad things happen.
They don't trust their husbands.
Yeah, even if they didn't believe it. Like, this is the one message that affects you, even if you don't believe it. We studied a lot of other messages, and the other messages really impact you if you believe it. But this one is like, even if you're only taught it, it does terrible things. Now, if you believe it, it does worse things. But like, this is just not good. And so we measured it for men too. And once again, if you believe it, very bad things. But we also wanted to know, is it true? Like, do all men struggle with lust? And so this was a large part of our survey. We broke it down into many different questions, many different scenarios. The whole mental Rolodex issue that Shanti Feldon talks about in For Women Only, like, is this actually something that bothers you? Like, we had many, many different, and this is, I think, where people are getting upset at us is because when you look at our numbers, what we found is that 75% of men say they struggle with lust, but only just over half of those 75% show any signs of it. So they either use porn, or they have the mental Rolodex, or they would do lust in all the different scenarios that we mentioned. So a lot of guys say they struggle with lust, but they don't show any signs of it. And so we think what's going on is that they're conflating noticing with lusting. Which
that has been hammered down all of our evangelical and Christian young men's throats, that if you think she's pretty, then you are committing adultery in your mind. Right. And so we wanted to look at that. And the other thing is, then when we looked specifically at porn use, what we found is just under 50% of men are using it today. It's between 45 and 50. I can't remember the exact number, but it's something around there. And most of them, it's intermittent binges or rarely. But there is a subset where it's daily or weekly, and the daily and weekly people are way worse off on every measure than the others. Which goes back to that dose response. Right. Yes. It proves that the more we watch stuff, then the more we are affected by it. Yes. However, let me also say, 80% of men have used porn at some point in time. And that percentage is higher the younger the men are. So makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. Basically, porn use starts when the internet started. So and that's true. We looked at that. We looked at ages, and we have some nice, pretty graphs about that one too. Okay. So when the internet came in, porn came in to men's lives. And I mean, there was Playboy and there were magazines. And stuff, but you had to go to a store and be deliberate. It was very different. It took effort. Yeah.
You had a lot more natural things to stop you.
Yeah, exactly. It took significant intentional action and choice and planning and premeditation to indulge in sexual deviancy through porn. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not have had a mindset of lust towards your neighbor, but it does mean that porn was not available 2 clicks away in your pocket at any time that you wanted, day or night, round the clock, at work, in the car, everywhere you go. The way it is today. Which has profoundly impacted the younger generations. Now, okay, I have. And let me say one more thing about the younger generations. What we found too is that there are a significant pocket of younger guys who watched porn for a few years when they were teens or their early 20s, who no longer watch porn, and whose marital and sexual satisfaction and sex life are almost as good as if they had never watched porn. Okay, say that again. So like, you have a guy, let's say he uses porn from 18 to 21 intermittently, but then he quits for what, he doesn't like doing it. He wants to get better. He stops. And there's a significant number of those guys who then marry and don't use porn, and their marital and sexual satisfaction and their wife's satisfaction is almost identical to guys who have never used porn. Interesting.
Which just is, in essence, like you were saying earlier, that's kind of the data that shows the transformation of the spirit.
Yeah.
Where it's like, when you have an issue and you have an addiction, and there are some people who, they repent and they transform and they're able to be redeemed, set free. And that's hopeful.
And so what we're finding is there's a huge difference between someone who used porn for like 2 years in their teenage life, you know, off and on, because they were tempted and their friends were using it and they saw it at the friend's house and then they clicked on a few things and then, you know, they spent one weekend or whatever. Like there's a huge difference between those guys and people who have used it consistently and still do.
Right. So the exposure and introduction to porn, if we would put like that teenage exposure or fascination, if it did not continue, what you're saying is that the data indicates that exposure and introduction to porn that did not become a habit has a profoundly different effect than long-term use and habitual dependence.
Yeah,
totally.
So there's a difference between exposure and addiction.
And we need to tell our boys this. We need our teenage boys to know this, that if they have used porn for a year, you are not doomed and you can stop.
Yeah.
Like we need our teenage boys to know this.
Yeah. You're not ruined. You can turn away.
I personally view porn exposure to young people as a form of sexual abuse.
Yes, it is. And it's in the criminal code.
In Canada, actually exposure to pornography is considered a
count of child abuse. Yes. And there are states, not all states, but there are states in the US also where intentional exposure of a child to pornographic or explicit content is considered a count of child abuse. So I think it's very, very important that that we address this messaging to our young men in the same way that we would address messaging to our daughters. If you were sexually violated by Uncle so-and-so at 14 years old, you are not a ruined human being. Yes, there is an impact on you, but also, yes, you can overcome this. You can process the trauma of this. We have to view it as a trauma.
Yes.
And then we look at it as something that is a piece of what you have experienced, but it is not your whole identity. If we message this to our young men today, that this is a trauma for you. It's not scintillating fun stuff. This is exposure to a trauma. This was sexual abuse. This was stealing your innocence. And you can still be a fabulous man.
Yeah.
Not if you hide it and go underground with it.
And this is where we need to teach our teenagers the phrase arousal non-concordance. I think this is I know that's like a super medical sounding thing, but this is really important for our teens to understand, because there's two aspects to arousal and sexual desire. There's the physiological one. So for boys, they get an erection, breathing gets heavier. For girls, you get lubrication, you know, all that sort of thing, right? So there's your physiological, and then there's your brain saying, yes, I want the sexy stuff. This is great. And what happens is with pornography, and this is actually even more so for girls, they find, but anyway, is you get the physiological response, but not necessarily the brain response. Like you could be absolutely horrified at what you see, but the problem is you get an erection. And so then you think, I like this.
And you go back for more.
And you go, and you think,
and there's still a dopamine hit. Because
yeah,
of the erection or because of the arousal.
Right. But just because you get aroused does not mean you liked it or wanted it or would want that in real life. And teens need to know that, because it's a really effective way of fighting against it.
Especially when so many the studies are showing so many young people, their first exposure to pornography is not, and I hate using the word, but tame porn. Yeah. It's a lot of times it's, you know, someone shows them something because they're like, oh my gosh, you won't believe this. It's and
it's something violent, like whatever, like just awful, and then they think I'm a sick person.
So I think there are a couple of different things here as we are, I mean, obviously it is an incredibly nuanced and multi-layered. None of this is like, oh, well, we just covered the topic today. So, you know, we just finished it. It doesn't work that way. There is one aspect that is that this data is very forward facing and can heavily improve our ability to teach our sons and daughters far more wholesome, healthy responses to sexuality, pornography exposure, potential sexual addiction, and healing after trauma. whether that was a porn exposure trauma or a childhood molestation trauma, whatever it is. And it's super important to have this data for men as well. So, but also there is, and I think that forward-facing message is not what has anyone up in arms.
No,
I think we're all in unity on that. So let's step back from all of that good news, because that's very much gospel good news.
Yeah.
It's proof that God and healing can have profound positive effects. So let's go back. Sorry, lost my train of thought there for a second. Let's go back to your 45 to 50% statistic of men who are actively, regularly, on some level, viewing porn now.
Yeah.
Versus the much higher numbers of those who have ever viewed porn.
Right.
I know a comment in one of my private groups was that the 45 to 50% statistic just, it doesn't align with lived experience in the betrayal trauma circle of women. And it also feels like it's out of alignment with lots of other research studies that seem to indicate that 70 to 99% of men watch porn at least once a month.
Right.
So
can I
what's the difference?
Okay. Do you want to handle this?
Let me do it, and then you can do the analogy better, I think. You're better at analogy.
Sure.
Okay. Let me
teamwork.
Like what is the difference between those studies and this study, as well as the peer-reviewed studies that this study is in alignment with?
Right. Okay. Yeah, let's do the stats question first. Okay. So what's important to remember is a study is only as good as what population it's measuring.
Okay.
And so actually, why don't you do this one about the dog ownership thing?
Yeah. Okay. So so I was like, there are lots of studies out there that have found that, even 98% of men use porn on the regular, right? And you have to look first, so when you see that kind of thing, on what was their study on, how were they advertising the study, and where were they advertising the study? So if you were to put out a survey that the call was, I want your experiences with dog ownership, and you were trying to figure out how many people owned dogs, a lot of people who've never owned dogs are not going to click on that survey because they're thinking, well, I've never owned a dog, so I don't have experience with dog ownership. Similarly, some of the studies that have found like upwards of a 90% porn rate have been marketed as, your experience, like porn use habits, stuff like surveys. So who's going to not click on those surveys? Guys who don't have porn use habits.
Makes sense.
So there's there's a level where, this is why, how we recruit people is important. Where we're recruiting them from is important. Like if I have a Yorkie, I'm on the Yorkies subreddit. And so if someone were to post,
we want to see the Yorkie as well as the baby. We need pictures of Yorkie and baby together.
Yeah. But if I were to post a survey about dog ownership on the Yorkie subreddit and nowhere else, I also might find that 95% of dog owners own at least one Yorkie. And that's just, it doesn't mean that my survey was invalid if I'm only talking about Yorkie owners. But if I want to then extrapolate it to people who have, Great Danes or German Shepherds, I might have the wrong information because maybe my survey found that a studio apartment is perfectly acceptable for a dog, but my dog is 4 pounds on average in that survey, versus we know that there's actually a wider range of experiences. I think additionally,
and the additional, it's also what you ask. Like if someone were to say to me, did you see porn? Have you had exposure to pornographic materials in the last week? I would say yes. Yeah. Because I watched The Witcher on Netflix, which I actually don't like very much, but we started watching it, and there's this one scene where it's like seriously pornographic and awful.
Kind of out of nowhere, yeah.
Like just out of nowhere. So so there's a question. Are you saying, did you seek out pornographic materials? I'd say no. Or did you see pornographic materials? I'd say yes. So it's also how you're phrasing the question, right? That matters. But the question of which group you're measuring is really important, because we were looking specifically at Christians, at married Christian men. And I know that there's that a lot of people say that Christians use it in higher rates. That actually has not been shown in peer-reviewed research. Samuel Perry has done one of the best looks at this. in his book, Addicted to Lust. And he's like one of the kings of
like he's top 5 researchers.
He's one of the most cited sociologists in North America, and he does almost entirely stuff on evangelical Christians in sociological journals. And he did this huge study on pornography, wrote the book Addicted to Lust, and our numbers mirror his almost exactly.
Interesting.
So when you're looking at a larger kind of like larger population as a whole versus just people who know this is a study about pornography, you end up finding very different things. So additionally, in our survey, the word porn didn't appear in how we marketed it.
No.
Okay. So one of the comments that I've got a bunch of comments coming up. One of the comments is like, okay, so this cuts both ways. Who wants to do a survey on healthy sexuality if they're not healthy sexually? Which brings the question, was this survey marketed to men who are already known to be sexually healthy and like in that pocket?
Yeah.
Or was it neutrally marketed since it wasn't marketed to porn users? Like, how does that play out?
It was pretty neutrally. Yeah, it was pretty neutrally marketed. I do think that this is a really valid question though.
I think so too.
Because this is the one thing that I would say to people. I believe, and we're probably going to get to this in a minute, we have so many internal reliability tests. There's no way that our survey correctly measured the experience of the people who took it. So our survey was a correct measure of the people who took it. The question is, are the people who took it representative of the larger Christian population as a whole? That's really where it gets to. And that's what your question gets to here, Sarah. Okay. And for that, again, I would just say that it is possible that we underrepresented a little bit, but I'll give you 2 reasons why I don't think it might have accounted for like a few percentage points, but it didn't account for like 20. And the reasons would be, first of all, that, like I said, we line up with Samuel Perry and with other large scale peer-reviewed research that's been done of this community. The second one is, and this one, actually, this is kind of a funny one, and it really surprised me. And I made Joanna redo this stat because I couldn't believe it. But when we looked at orgasm rates on the Great Sex Rescue Survey, so the survey of 20,000 women, we had like 48%, almost always or always 16%, more than half. Like we had this graph. And then when we asked men, how often does your wife orgasm? It was exactly the same.
Wow.
Like within a percent. We thought it would be off. We thought that a lot of women were faking and guys would know it. We found no evidence of that. Like it was exactly the same to the percentage on every single category. So if we agree with the data from Great Sex Rescue, you kind of have to agree with our data from this, because they reinforce each other. And that's just one example. There's all kinds of other frequency stats, et cetera, where the data from both is the same, whether we ask women or men.
So it kind of, the Great Sex Rescue Survey actually works as a control for the men's survey.
Okay. Now, another layer to this question would be, I see it just popped up. Did you send it necessarily to your audience, or was it just marketed at large? How did you get these guys?
It was both. It was more from our list this time.
Yeah, I would say that this one is more heavily from our list than the women's one, because we had a different research question. So it didn't matter quite as much. But like I said, the populations matched. The Great Sex Rescue Survey was only 40% from my list. I would say this one was probably closer to 60. Because we did have other people sharing the link as well, and it went quite big on social media. So it wasn't only from my list, but I would say the populations who took both surveys were pretty much
comparable.
The wife here, the husband here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course,
I will say too, for the women's survey, we heavily marketed, like I think you sent us like probably a good 6% of our respondents. Natalie Hoffman sent us a good 5%. Like we had huge numbers of people from
other people,
betrayal, trauma.
Okay.
Advocates. Yeah.
And it still lined up with our results for the men's survey.
And just an ironic side note, didn't Gary Thomas's audience contribute heavily to the Great Sex Rescue? Because like he shared that link and he sent you a significant percentage.
About the same number as you. Yeah.
A lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel I feel just like, wow.
I know.
Yeah. So like a significant percentage were from people who may not agree with your philosophies at all.
We have a lot of people who didn't agree with us.
We have a lot of people who didn't. Yeah. And that was deliberate. We wanted that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I think those are really good things to quantify for those who are asking questions, because it's important to verify that those who were taking these surveys, even though there are big numbers of the sample size, but it wasn't operating in an echo chamber of just a bunch of people who all think and act the same and that are likely to reflect the same behavioral patterns. Yeah. Okay. So when we are, let me see, here's another question. I think we've answered several of the ones that I had. But I want to come back to this one before I move on. How do we know that self-reporting men aren't lowballing their porn use?
Great.
Becca can take that one. I'm just going to plug in while she does.
So there's two different issues with lying in surveys, right? There's something called social desirability bias, where, we want people to think well of us. And so we answer in a way that we want people to think well of us. And then the other one is people who just lie because they're randomly picking things and they're not paying attention. Okay. So there's kind of those two things that happen. And what a lot of studies have found is that social desirability bias, provided you are writing your questions in a non-accusatory way, like, are you a piece of crap person who does this? Is not actually that.
Come on, Rebecca, we know that's how you wanted to write many of these questions.
Hey, you pervert, do you ever?
No, we do not want to shame people. We want to help people heal.
Yes. And we also want to get accurate responses. And so we don't act like that in the surveys. No, but a lot of studies in psychometrics, large studies that are studying things like really intense stuff like pedophilia or incest or like really taboo topics, racism, kind of like those kinds of questionnaires. In anonymous surveys without prejudicial wording in the questions, people are pretty darn honest. Yeah. And again, we're talking about things that are way worse than the public
socially speaking.
What we're asking. Yeah, not actually. Yeah, like publicly speaking, socially even less desirable. Additionally, when it comes to our particular survey and any survey at all, you always have to run statistics to make sure that we do reliability checks, because that's what lying can make a problem. So when you lie on a question, your answers are not reliable or they're not valid, depending on which way you're going. So, but both of these kind of have tests that you kind of test both at once. What happens is you can actually set up a survey to make it harder to maliciously lie, to malinger on a survey. One of the ways to do that is to, in essence, hide your survey question in the data. We did that with GSR really well that we had both progressives and conservative Christians like blowing up our inbox, getting really mad at us because of our agenda. And both sides thought we had the agenda for the other side. Yeah. So that's a major win in survey development. When everyone's mad at you, you did a good job. And so with the men's survey, one of the ways that we did that was we asked about porn use almost at the very end. So they had already given us all their other answers before we asked them about their porn habits. And so what that means is if they lie about the porn habits, they can't then malinger and change all their answers for everything else.
Okay. That makes sense.
Like kind of be
because here's the issue. If a guy uses porn, we expect that is going to affect his marital satisfaction, how much foreplay he does, his level of sexual dysfunction, all of that stuff. If guys were lying, if there was a significant portion of men who use porn but didn't admit to it, then we would not have found a difference between men who use porn and men who don't on the other measures.
Yes.
Because what we can find is like, if a guy says he uses porn, he's like 4 times more likely to suffer from a delayed ejaculation. I think it's 4 times. I might be making that up. I'm not very good with numbers. Joanna's a number person, but it's like a lot. Okay. So if a guy uses porn, he's like way more likely to suffer from some types of sexual dysfunction. If he uses porn, he's way less likely to do foreplay. If he uses porn, he's way more likely to believe these things.
He's also less likely to be satisfied. Like, there's also a lot of questions that aren't socially undesirable to answer that we know match up with porn use. Like, are you satisfied with how exciting your sex life is?
Yeah.
Do you think you try enough new things?
Yeah.
Things like, how satisfied are you with how happy your wife is with this or that? Like, there's a lot of questions which aren't another thing they could just lie about.
Think about it this way. Let's say that we were trying to figure out if Democrats and Republicans properly, like if someone's, how many people are Democrats? Okay. And I'm sorry to bring something political, but I just think people will understand this. I don't want to talk about politics, but
make it about political affiliation, whether or not you have a dog or something.
No, people get this. Okay. So let's say that I'm trying to measure, what percentage of people are Democrats.
1 second.
We've all got kids here.
Okay. We're you know what? This is my version of a crying baby.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm in the middle of a live video. Can you go out, please? Thank you.
Okay. So let's say that I started my survey asking how they feel about abortion rights and gun rights and education and healthcare. And then I asked them if they were Democrats. All right. If a lot of people lied and said they weren't Democrats, then I would expect that my answers on gun rights and abortion wouldn't really line up with whether or not people said they were Democrats.
Whether their political affiliation would not predict their answers
on those things. But if political affiliation does predict their answers, it means they weren't lying about political affiliation. And that's what we found with the porn use, is that the answers on all the other questions line up. And like I said, daily porn use is worse on all these other measures than weekly porn use, than intermittent, than rarely.
Yeah. So we have 2 different kinds of validity tests that our survey totally passes on this. We have predictive validity, which means if you score in X, like in this criterion, which is porn use, you are more likely to do all these other things that other surveys have also shown are related to porn use. And that's what our survey found. People who use porn have worse sex in general. Okay.
So Patrick Weaver is on here and he just popped up a question. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Patrick.
How are you accounting for the many couples who watch porn together?
We didn't actually ask that.
Well, because first of all,
we did ask if women watched porn. We didn't ask if they watched it together. We did ask, like, does your wife watch porn? Does she read erotica, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, we did not ask if they specifically watched it together or not.
Okay. So as far as the study is concerned, that's not a measure. We're not going there. Okay. No worries. It's a good thing to
question, though.
Just throw out. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Here is a couple of others. Let me just look here. Yes, I'm on a live.
Can I say something,
Sarah? Stick your face in, Mom? Yeah, go for it. My mom is here. She's going to stick her face in. We just have the whole family today.
Yeah.
Hey, is this Sheila?
This is Sheila.
Hi.
And Rebecca.
Hi,
So this is the mother-daughter duo here. This is my mom, Kate.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. There's over 100 people watching on Face.
Oh. I thought it just her.
Nope. We're live streaming. Is there anything else you would like?
Yeah, I just found these doors.
Okay, well, I don't want to talk about it right now.
Okay. I know that one of the big problems that people are having is this question of, okay, but all of these other surveys found such higher percentages. Why did yours find lower? And especially because that doesn't line up with what I experienced. And my answer to that, let me tell you a story. Let's say that the average income in the United States is $50,000 a year. I don't know what it is. I'm making a number up out of a hat. So let's just say it's $50,000.
Easy numbers. Okay.
That doesn't mean that the average income on every street is $50,000. So there could be some streets where the average income is like $350,000 and some streets where the average income is $20,000. But the average income might still be $50,000. And I think what's going on for some women is your experience is, but everybody I know has betrayal trauma, but everybody I know uses porn, and you're underestimating, and this is a huge problem and you're not seeing it. I have been in a church where I would say probably 80 to 90% of the men my age watched porn.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And I have been in a church where I would say probably 20%, maybe 10. And there is a huge difference.
And they do exist.
And what I want women to know is that if you are in a place where it honestly is 80 to 90%, that very well could be true for you, but it is not true for a lot of people, and you need to get out. Like, do not raise your kids there.
Yeah.
Do not, like, think about Jim Bob Duggar. Okay. In 2015, he I think it was with Megyn Kelly or someone, he was doing an interview, and he said he talked to other parents and all of their boys were doing this to their sisters too. And so he didn't think it was a big deal. So in his circle, it was normal for teenage boys to molest their sisters. It is not normal for teenage boys to molest their sisters, but in his pocket, it was.
We were talking about this earlier when we were prepping and looking at questions and absorbing the different discussions that are going on and recognizing. I just want to say this. Well, let me finish and then I'll come back to that. But there are absolutely what I would call cess pockets. Where the ratios align with teachings, philosophies, mindsets, and subcultural expectations on sexuality and ownership and entitlement. And these cess pockets exist all around the world.
Yeah.
They exist in every country. They exist not just in Christianity, but also in other belief systems. And so I don't think any of us are saying or implying that those pockets don't exist.
Right.
We know they do.
Right.
I have tens of thousands of people in my social media audience that represent sub pockets, cess pockets, where this has been the norm. The thing is, it isn't the norm everywhere. And with 7.5 billion people on the planet, just because we have experienced it as a very valid norm, and just because we know women who have experienced it as a valid norm in other places, and just because it is a global problem, doesn't mean necessarily that it is a global norm or a global standard for baseline. So
now I want to say 50% still a lot.
This is also true. Yes, exactly. I mean,
like, nobody should get excited.
Huge.
Nobody should get excited about 50%.
50% is deplorable.
Yes.
But what we're saying, or what your data is saying, is that just like other peer-reviewed studies by Perry and so on, is that 50% or so, while it may be a very big reality, doesn't mean that 80+% is a reality everywhere.
Right.
And at the same time, two things can be true. There can be tens of thousands of us who have been in largely conservative, high moral value types of circles where that is at least preached. These high moral values are preached. And we can have experienced cess pockets of 80% plus men living in sexual addiction. Both can be true at the same time. And one valid experience does not have to invalidate other data, and data saying that this larger baseline does not have to invalidate our lived experience. Now, does that mean there isn't more to discover? No.
Yeah,
there is so much more to discover. Does it mean that younger people, the younger generation, the complete iPhone generation, doesn't have way higher numbers than perhaps some of the older generation. I mean, like if we look at the guys and we're measuring guys in their 60s, well, you know, they didn't have instant pocket access to porn everywhere until they were far established in their maturity. Yeah. Whereas you look at 21-year-olds who've grown up with pocket access to porn, if they didn't have education, awareness, filters, guardrails on their exposure, they're going to have a vastly different life experience. So our kids growing up and dating in the next generation are going to be looking at a massively different landscape than the measurable landscape right now. So I guess I wanted to share that just from the perspective that these cess pockets 100% exist. I want to reiterate that the age dynamics and the exposure dynamics of certain samples will heavily impact the results. And I also want to say, and I kind of meant to start out with this, and now I'm burying it like an hour into our conversation, but I am not unaware that that there is a tremendous sense of perhaps even a compulsive need among many of us in the betrayal trauma community to know that our experience is valid. And we have been betrayed by so many public figures, celebrities, authors, speakers, flawed data studies, all of these things that have been harmful, that and we felt gaslighted, and we felt word saladed, that's not a term, but whatever, from so many people and so many directions, that I can understand that this would be a really raw nerve. This whole thing, like we could be sitting here and a whole lot of us, because I've been watching the conversations in the private support groups, a whole lot of us are ready and braced to be betrayed again. Yeah. As we're looking at the potential data coming out, and we're like, okay, hold the phone. This is not going to go well. And I just want to say that one of the things, Sheila, that I admire so much about you is that you have been committed to remove your own content, to recalibrate along the way as you have learned. And as data has impacted, and stories have impacted, and lived experience has impacted your research. I know that there are a lot of things that I thought and believed 6, 8, 10, 15, definitely 20 years ago that I could not stand behind anymore. So a big part of the reason I wanted to have today's conversation was not necessarily to arrive at final conclusions, because I think this is an ongoing conversation that will continue to be informed for a very long time. But because out of all the people talking about this and holding publishers accountable and holding researchers and authors accountable, I think that your audience and mine have come to expect a very high standard of transparency. And that's something I value very highly. And I think you and I both take very seriously.
Can I,
which is why we're having this conversation today.
Yeah. There's a couple of things. I have about 15 more minutes.
Yeah, you got to go. And that's fine.
So there's a couple of things I really want to say in the 15 minutes. I just want to answer a couple more questions that came through. The first was, but you were only studying porn addiction. And the thing is, a lot of people who only intermittently watch porn may have major sex addictions, and you're not trained in sex addiction and you're not picking that up. And I think we kind of answered this question, but I would just say again, that the thing is, we just didn't find that people who said they weren't watching porn had all those other negative effects. And so what we found is that maybe there's a pocket of sex addicts who don't watch porn, but it would be a very small pocket, because we really did find that if you don't watch porn, you don't suffer sexual dysfunction in the same way. You don't have the same view of women. You don't like
the same entitlement, the same.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
So there's a parcel of things that all go together.
Right.
And so I just don't think that there's a huge number of sex addicts that we didn't pick up on. I believe that our study accurately looked and revealed the truth about the people that we studied. And I think that it is true of the larger Christian community as a whole. I don't think it's true of every single church.
Yeah.
And this is something that I am going to be saying very, very loudly. And this is one of my rallying cries that I have said over and over and over again. So one of the reasons we're in this mess is because there are certain churches that expect that men will lust, that blame women for it, that create a male entitlement to sex. And it's this whole parcel that goes along with porn use. And when you are in churches that have that whole parcel of, you know, women existing mostly to serve men, of women not deserving respect, et cetera, you're going to see higher rates of porn use. And you know, so what we've been telling women over and over again is if you are not in a safe community, just know that not all Christian communities are like that. And we need to be able to say it's okay to leave. And I've been telling women this for years, is that sometimes you just got to get out. And so that's going to be one of the bigger things that we say too, is like, there are some good churches out there. And if you're in a place that is not safe, like if you are in a place where every single man is in an accountability group or is in a recovery group, get out. Like,
right.
Like, what is wrong with that place now, unless it's like a recovery church where people come from other places because we need, that's one thing.
Yeah. Or like all the men are accountability groups, but they're not all there for their own accountability versus like,
but there's a problem if that many people have, because this stuff goes in parcels. And so, you know, when we see huge amounts of porn use, we're also going to see a much lower view of women, a huge emphasis on women respecting men, a huge view of male entitlement. We're going to see all of these things all in pockets. And that's really one of the things we're fighting against, is we just want people to stop spreading the narrative that porn is every man's battle, that it's inevitable, that lust is inevitable, that God made men to lust, that this is just part of testosterone.
That right there.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us, including you guys, are saying that lust doesn't affect all men. Just like every person alive can lie.
Yes.
It's real easy. If you decide to lie, you can just choose to lie, or you can choose not to lie and tell the truth. I mean, this is really not rocket science, but it's a choice. There's a big difference between someone asking me, have you ever lied before? Yeah.
And do you struggle with lying?
Do you lie? Do you struggle with lying? No.
Is lying a battle in your life? Yeah.
Is lying a constant thing in my life? No. No, I'm all about the truth. But have I ever lied? Well, yeah, I guarantee there have been times where I like have had a knee-jerk reaction, and then later I'm like, oh my goodness, yeah, this is like, I need to go back and correct that. And so if you ask people, have you ever lied?
100%.
100% who are answering honestly will say yes. If you ask people, are you a liar? Well, that is not necessarily the same thing. There are those who are liars.
Yes.
But is that everyone? No. So
but when it becomes everyone, it excuses it. And that's the issue, is that the way that we talk about lust, we make it sound like it is a battle. It is the main sin.
It's an inevitable battle.
And when we talk about that, when we talk about it as a man's main struggle, we know from our Great Sex Rescue, it has terrible effects on women. Like, even hearing that message growing up hurts women, and hearing that message growing up hurts men. And it's not biblically accurate, because in the Bible, we are all to put lust to death. So it is not biblically accurate that every man lusts. Paul said in Romans 16, 10 out of the 29 people that he mentions by name are women. And he says that they are his co-laborers. And he said, greet one another with a holy kiss. He had totally platonic relationships with women that were not burdened by lust. And that should be the Christian expectation. And,
right. So
and yet,
God, in other words, God did not create males
to lust,
for the existence of living in lust. And that is what books like Every Man's Battle and Love and Respect and Married Sex and everything.
Exactly.
You can't understand that women, you can't comprehend the fact that men lust all the time. They think about sex every 6 seconds. It's constantly on the mind.
Yeah. Like Gary Thomas said, every man is ready to seize a sexual opportunity.
Yeah. And there isn't a man alive who doesn't have bent sexual desires. I'm sorry. Are you telling me that every man breathing is just waiting for kink?
And he was quoting Al Mohler, who is the head of one of the Southern Baptist seminaries when he said that. So Gary Thomas and Al Mohler, both of the Southern Baptist Convention, believe that every man is bent in his sexual desires. That is not biblical. And what we show from our survey is that it's not accurate of men on the ground. I think that's good news. Like our survey lines up with the Bible, which just some people struggle. Yes. And when they struggle, when they sin, things go badly for them, but not everybody does because Jesus redeems. And I want this message that all men struggle with lust, that it's part of testosterone, that women can never understand. I want it to go away because it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is a lot of the problems that we're having right now. It excuses the behavior. You know, if all men do this, then, oh, he can't really help it. Boys will be boys. You know, it's really her fault. What was she wearing? You know, what can you expect? And that needs to stop. And it just normalizes it so that pastors can laugh about it. And it shouldn't be normalized. We should see this as a sin, which is a choice, not as something which is just inevitable about being male. And I think that's what our survey shows. I'm really glad it does. But again, that doesn't invalidate if you grew up where your husband, your brother, your dad, your cousins all used porn, every man you know uses porn, my heart goes out for you. And that does not mean that all of those men didn't use porn. It means you grew up in a cess pocket.
Right. Well, you know, it goes along. We were talking about this. I've heard so many women share how painful it has been when their sex and porn addicted husband, when they started saying, you know what, I'm not willing to live with this anymore. Simply not willing to live with this anymore. You've got to get help. And then they hear things which have been perpetrated in the recovery community, sometimes in 12-step programs, and at other times in Christian circles. And the idea is addiction is a disease. I am helpless in the face of my addiction. And this is the same as cancer. If you leave me because I am cheating on you, whether it's with porn or in real life, you are abandoning a cancer patient. That makes you a terrible spouse. That is the same as you, like your child getting leukemia and you just dropping them off at the hospital and never coming back. You are a horrible wife and a terrible woman if you don't stay right here with me for the ride straight to hell.
Yeah. Let me just say right now, if you have not read The Great Sex Rescue, please go get it because we demolished that. We demolished that argument. And
I will drop a link to it in the comments as well.
Twice Paul says, once in Colossians and once in 1 Thessalonians, or is it 2 Thessalonians? 2 verse 4, I believe. Anyway, that you are to put lust to death. You are to put it to death. There is no excuse. And he never says the way you put it to death is you blame your wife for it and she just has more sex with you. No, you put it to death. And that's the way it needs to be talked about.
Right.
This is on that person's responsibility.
This is not an inevitable.
Is it an addiction? I mean, I know there's a huge debate on that in the literature, and that's not something we were trying to answer. But even if it is, which anyway, doesn't matter what I think.
There's a great book called Addiction is a Disease of Choice.
Yes.
That answers a lot of this.
Like it still is a betrayal, and you have to stay with someone who is betraying you, and it still is abuse, because that's coercion. Having sex with someone when you're using porn and not telling them is a form of coercion. So like, this is all very, very bad stuff.
Right.
and
Inexcusable.
And we need to change the narrative that all men do this, because they don't. And if we say that all men do, then it normalizes it. And it makes it sound like, well, if all guys do it, how can you be mad at me for doing it?
Exactly.
But no, all men don't do it. And I can tell you, my husband doesn't, my father-in-law doesn't, my sons-in-law do not. And I know that, like, I would bet my life on it. Like, these are all good men. And that doesn't mean that, none of the people in my family have ever used porn, like in our extended family or wherever, but people can get over it, know, and we need to give our young people that message as well. And we need people to see, and this is a hard one to swallow. And I know, and I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but there's a difference between someone who was exposed to porn as a kid, who chose to use it as a teen, who's been using it consistently, secretively for like 25 years, and someone who binged on a work trip a couple of times and hates themselves for it and wants to quit.
That leads me to go ahead.
And I just think that we need to take the first one super seriously. And I don't know that we do when we conflate it with the guy who used porn like twice.
Right.
Because there are some people
in today's world, I think it would be highly naive, and some people are going to love to hear me say this. I think it would be highly naive to assume that any adult or even teenage or young adult man has not been exposed to pornographic material. There's just about no one, unless they grew up under a rock in the Yukon and never saw a phone or an internet screen, that has not been exposed or introduced to pornographic or explicit material. Does that mean they're binging on it? No. Does that mean they're addicted to it? No. But we can't expect to raise children that are never going to see pornographic material. It's just not possible in today's world. We have to talk about something. We have to talk about this subject from the perspective that it is an inevitable exposure waiting to happen. We want to delay it for our kids, and we want to give our sons and our daughters, our husbands and brothers, our sisters and wives and mothers, all of us, the best possible chance to live free from entrapment in addiction and the pornified style of relating. And speaking of pornified style of relating, last question. I know one of the questions that's come up is, well, what do guys like Michael Cusick and Andrew Bauman and these others, have they seen this data? What do they think of it? Because they work with men who are going through this.
I think Andrew Bauman's endorsement is on the back cover. I haven't seen the official back cover yet, but yes, both Andrew and Michael have read the book and highly endorsed it. I need to run to the doctors. One last thing. I just remember when I was talking about the parcel, like all the stuff that goes together. So you have porn use, and then you have like male entitlement to sex, not spending enough time on foreplay, et cetera, et cetera. And I would just say that, like, to women who, your husband may have watched porn like a few times, but you don't see all those other things. This is probably something that you can get past. Like, it's going to be good. If he says he's only used porn a few times, but you do see all those other things,
he's lying.
This is something which needs to get looked at a lot more seriously. So that's what I often tell women is, if you hear about your husband's porn use, or you see that he's used porn, or he confessed it, or you catch him or whatever, don't focus on the porn use, focus on the rest of the package, because the rest of the package will tell you a lot more about where he's at and what your recovery is going to look like.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what our survey shows too. And I think that can be hopeful. going forward for people on both sides, people who, have guys who have seriously used a lot of porn and they need that validated, but then people who, okay, it was a slip up. He didn't mean it. It isn't impacting the rest of his life. He really doesn't want to do this again. And let's figure out how to get through this. Or my son used it and he feels badly. It was a slip up. He doesn't want to use it. Or my daughter used it and it was a slip up. And how do we get forward?
And I think that also speaks to the lived experience of, men lie about this. And you know what? Men, like husbands, especially abusive husbands, I mean, what do they do best? They lie, right? And they do lie when it's not, an anonymous survey kind of situation. That's why I think, looking at the larger picture of those things that we know it's predictive of. I think the way that I don't know if this actually ended up in the book or not. When we were talking about it, I said, like, it's like treating porn like cancer. It's like, no matter what, you got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's in the book. Yeah. No matter what, you got to get rid of it. But sometimes it's, sometimes it's just a mole that can be easily cut out. And sometimes it's metastasized and it's a bigger deal.
Right.
But no matter what, you deal with it. We never brush it under the rug. You never
skip
go
treatment.
To the dermatologist. You never don't get the mole checked out. You don't not get the lump, like, you don't not go for a mammogram. Like there's can you tell Connor to get his son? Okay. Thank you. There's a lot going on around here.
That's okay. You know what? I think we have thoroughly covered this for today.
We just keep it professional around here.
It's all good. You know what? We are not at all about being fake or unnecessarily glamorous, and we are all about keeping it real. I mean, that's really, really what it is. Oh, sleepy baby. And maybe hungry baby or just sleepy baby.
No, she's just sleepy now.
Oh,
refusing to sleep in her cot. So here we are.
Okay. That's Rebecca. One of the people is like, I forgot her name.
Rebecca and Vivian.
So Rebecca and Vivian, definitely. All right. For those of you who have had big questions about this, I hope that today's discussion has at least opened the door to further dialogue if it didn't answer all your questions. And that's fine. If it didn't answer all your questions, I don't think any of us are saying, hey, we have all the answers and we're just here to make sure you fall in line. I think open dialogue as we continue, me in the work that I do, Rebecca and Sheila in the work they do, as we continue all of us to keep exploring, to keep digging, to keep researching, to keep interviewing, listening, and learning along the way on this journey, we have the potential to collectively keep working together and to change the landscape for the next generation. And I think we are well on the way to doing that. We don't have all the answers yet. We don't know how to fix all the problems. We don't have all the solutions. Sometimes we feel like we don't have any of them. We just have more questions. But we are here and we are willing to be in dialogue. We are willing to wrestle through the tough questions. We are willing to address the fears and the worries. And I think that is the posture that is so badly needed for all of us so that we can continue growing and being more and more accurate and healthy in each generation successively. Is that right, Rebecca? Would you agree with that?
That's really our goal. That really is our goal. Yeah. And I think we are all working together on that. And I hope that we were able to answer some of the other pressing questions that people do have. Because I know this is a really sensitive topic. And
it is. And it needs these nuanced conversations.
Sorry, I know there's a lot going on around here.
That's okay.
Normally nap for 45 minutes.
It's all good.
Guys,
we're going to let you go.
Yeah.
go kick mommy butt here. And
that's good.
All righty. We'll talk to you later. Let's keep this conversation going. None of this is final. This is all a work in progress. And thank you for engaging and participating and not being afraid to dig into the tough questions. All of us, Sheila, Rebecca, Joanna, me, and everyone on our pages that puts time and effort into this dialogue. Thank you for being who you are. Bye, Rebecca. Y'all have a good day.
You too.